People who have surprisingly woken up admitted into a hospital. What happened? Concussion after falling while riding my vicious pony. Apparently I fell headfirst onto the road. Woke up on my back in the hospital. I think. Must have been in an accident. Flipped my head over to see the other side of my body. Ouch. So, I have a head injury. Why is this little metal pan next to my head? Bleeg vomit. Oh, that's why. Threw up when anyone came in the room till mid-morning and was released after a few hours of non-throwing up. Does anyone want to hear my equally exciting broken wrist story? I remember parts of when the paramedics were taking me to the hospital in the ambulance, asking me about a 666 tattoo I had and something about how one of their sisters also attempted suicide, but I lost consciousness again before I could say I didn't remember even thinking about suicide. I woke up in the hospital and apparently I drank way too much and my dad found me unconscious. Everyone thought I tried to kill myself because I was alone, so it took a while before they just let me go without being taken to a psych ward. I was actually pretty depressed. And now I wonder if I was trying to die. I just feel bad about apparently throwing up on my cat before anyone found me. My dad said she was meowing next to me until someone came home. Good guy cat. Not me, but my 6-year-old son. Stopped breathing at school last week. Just woke up today. Still on breathing assistance. Cause is yet undetermined. Stay strong. I fell off my longboard almost exactly a year ago and landed on my head. No, I was an idiot and wasn't wearing a helmet. To this day I don't remember the accident, but spending 10 days as the youngest person in the stroke ward because of brain bleeding is tedious as frick. All things considered, I'm extremely lucky I didn't snap my neck the way I apparently landed, or become a vegetable, or die. My new helmet might look stupid as frick, but it beats cracking my head open again. I was playing with my cousin and it was my day. I remember throwing around a ball and I went to the street to get it. I was 7 at the time. I woke up at the hospital a day later and my face and jaw hurt like heck. I remember feeling as if my teeth were loose. I had gotten hit by a van in front of my family on my day. I heard stories how guys on the corner ran to the van when that happened because he kept going and ripped him out the van. Could have been a hit and run if it wasn't for the guys hanging outside. That day sucked butt. Finally I've got a story to tell. I woke up in a hospital bed with an IV in my arm. My face and back of my head were hurting rather badly. I managed to get out of bed and looked at my clothes. They were all covered in blood, but I wasn't feeling crap. I was actually feeling rather good. I was still pee from the night before. After a while a nurse came into the room. She didn't speak a word of English. For context, I had just moved to a new country and I didn't speak the local language, so I still had no idea what was going on. By this point I realized my lip had been sewn back together along with the back of my head. After a while I was given breakfast and eventually a doctor came into the room. He explained now I was brought in by an ambulance after being attacked. All I knew was I was out drinking with a friend. He then went on to tell me that I feel unconscious while being sewn together and they had no idea if it was from head injuries or my very high blood alcohol level. Eventually my friend came to the hospitality. He explained how we got jumped at a beer festival by some other guys and how I went down like a sack of potatoes. Later on I got in contact with who was my girlfriend at the time, now my wife. We had our third date in the hospital restaurant. I got released the next day, Monday morning, and I have to travel home via the subway in my bloodstained clothes. I got released the next day, Monday morning, and I have to travel home via the subway in my bloodstained clothes. Well, at least nobody was gonna frick with you on the way home. This one is not me, but a close friend, and I think the story is amazing. He was locked out of his house, and his landlord was gone for the weekend. So he decided he would go around back to the alley and climb in a window. So he put a ladder on a dumpster, something he said he knew he shouldn't do as he teaches safety courses. Anyway, he fell off the top of the ladder onto the pavement, cracking open his head. Here is where it gets interesting. And an anesthesiologist just happened to be driving by and watched him fall. The man had been out to lunch with his daughter who was visiting him, and they decided to drive past the house in which he grew up. It happened to be on that street. So the man stops, calls an ambulance, and then calls the hospital to arrange for surgery. He was in surgery in under 30 minutes. Fast forward a month, a change. My friend wakes up in a bed with a feeding tube and a catheter. He is tied down to the bed and a sign nearby reads, "Caution, patient spits and kicks." He unstraps himself and starts to take the tubes out when he realizes he probably doesn't need to escape and calls for a nurse. He was a little confused when he first woke up and just wanted to run. So now he has a metal plate in his head and is doing fine, staying off ladders. I told him that he was one lucky son of a bee. Whenever I hear about half-conscious people still kicking and spitting, it amazes me. It has to means that persons has way more fight than flight in them. I still don't know. I was found unconscious next to my bicycle in a street on the way home from work. I have about 6 hours of amnesia. Apparently I came to and was conscious on the side of the road before the ambulance arrived. Cool thing is I used to be an EMT, and as I became alert aware on the hospital bed, I recognized that I was A&OX2. When head injuries are in play, medical people will test a person's alertness and orientation to name, location and time. If not A&OX3 then things are not good. Told the nurse once I recognized this. Hey, I'm A&O by 2 as I don't know how long I've been out for. What day and time is it? I woke up to someone giving me first aid, but I could have easily woken up in a hospital if things had been much worse. My church is a program similar to Cub Scouts Boy Scouts called Stockade Battalion. We were playing dodgeball, the variant where you go to the back wall of the other team when you get out and catch a ball thrown by your team to get back in. A teammate and I were trying to catch the same ball to get back in, but I ended up catching it first. He pushed me, and I hit my head twice. First on the metal support for the basketball hoop, second on the ground, and everything went to black. I blacked out in a room full of teenagers playing dodgeball, and came to in the same room, empty except for me and one of the adult leaders presumably applying first aid. I don't know how much time had passed. I don't know if the room was cleared immediately when I didn't stand up, or if I was just left there, undiscovered until the game was over. I didn't have a headache, just a bump on my head and a scrape on my leg. I was more disoriented than injured, but if things had been any worse I sure hope they would have called an ambulance. Just a heads up, but you are ever in a situation where a person has a decreased level of consciousness, such as losing consciousness but certainly not having to go that far, please call an ambulance. You were lucky, but seriously, they should have called an ambulance as soon as you were unresponsive, and certainly when beginning first aid. I'm glad you're okay. When I was 15 I was hearing voices. I was severely depressed and just losing my mind. I felt like I was just a worthless piece of crap, and everybody would be better off without me annoying them. I swallowed every single pill in my house. Tylenol, aspirin, dad's meds, stepmom's meds, etc etc. I'm talking about over 500 pills. I skipped school that day to do this. I went into my shed after swallowing the pills to die. My dad came home early from work that day and went into the shed to grab some tools and found me passed out. I woke up in the hospital with a tube down my throat getting my stomach pumped. I'll never forget the taste of the charcoal. I crapped black for a good few days. I was so pissed that I was found at the time, but after looking back on the whole situation a few weeks later I saw the amount of pain I had caused my family and friends. I still wish to die every day, but I'll never look at suicide again the same. I just can't do it and see it as a selfish move now. I literally fell off the balcony of my flat, 2 stories, landed on my neighbor's shed and then woke up a day later with my neighbor, who is basically a 90-year-old man, exclaiming how his rabbit found me. Dashing through the snow, on a pair of broken skis, o'er the fields we go, crashing into trees. The snow is turning red. I think I might be dead. I woke up in the hospital with stitches in my head. I got in an altercation with the sidewalk while skateboarding. The memories are very muddled. I don't remember that day or several days after. From what I was told, a friend who was following came around the corner and I was seizing and vomiting on the ground. I was placed in a medically induced coma for transport since I was fighting the paramedics, and then taken to the hospital where I mentally reverted to about 12 years old. The first thing I actually remember is waking up and my mother asking me if I know where I am. I didn't really know how, but I knew I was in the hospital and I had been in an accident. She told me later that she had asked me that question every day for 6 days, and that was the first day I knew the answer. I made a fairly speedy recovery after that, but people treated me like a chinadle for a long time afterward. It drove me crazy. Had a bad asthma attack in the middle of the night as a little kid. Was not a fun time for my parents. I wasn't very shocked. I spent a lot of time in the hospital as a kid and I was half awake as they put the IV in, so I quickly put everything together when I woke up properly in the morning. A little bit different but still true to effect. I was beginning a game of Wii Sports tennis at a friend's house. Next thing I knew I was in my bed with a hospital band on my arm. Turns out we had a couple too many drinks and my quick walk home turned into me attempting to break into someone's house whom I thought was my own. Thank God they called an ambulance for me and not the police. I didn't feel too bad, but I lost my wallet and had hella mosquito bites on my butt. Acid trip when I was already in a bad place mentally and had popped a couple pills the day morning before tripping, and it caused a really terrible panic attack. My friends tried to calm me down but it just wasn't working, so they decided to be safe and bring me to the hospital. Good friends. Was at our family Christmas gathering eating cookies and candy and woke up in the hospital a week later. Discovered the hard way I was a diabetic after going into a diabetic coma after my blood sugar hit 750. Coma lasted for 5 days. My ex-husband beat me so badly I was in a coma for a week. 15 broken bones, skull fracture, permanent nerve damage. He almost killed me. Sadly, it took another year before I left him. But I did leave and I'm now married to an amazing man that treats me and our children with much love and respect. Woke up naked with a tube in my dong and without glasses. A nurse came in and gave me scrambled eggs, then yanked the dong tube out, and a cop drove my naked butt back to my dorm. Learn how to hold your alcohol before you get catheterized. I was 10 years old knocking on a friend's door to see if he could come play, then I awoke in a hospital with like my whole family there. Turns out I had a seizure. That was the first of many. I was walking my girlfriend home and woke up in the hospital. Traumatic brain injuries and more for me. She died. We had been hit by a drunk driver. The head injuries meant that I kept forgetting that I had broken bones and why I had them, and that my girlfriend had been killed. Had to keep remembering those things over and over for a while. Please don't drink and drive. I woke up in Bethesda Hospital just outside Washington DC looking up at my mother and brother. Apparently I had been in a medically induced coma for a while and they were finally bringing me out of it. It took several days before I even remembered that I had been in Iraq. Now I remember falling asleep in a hospital on one side of the world and waking up on the other side of the world weeks later. It wasn't even a bomb or anything like that that got me. A nasty disease fricked me up pretty bad and I spent a long time recovering. But that was almost 10 years ago and I'm doing a lot better now. It was horrible. I remember waking up and seeing I was at the emergency room and seeing my husband screaming at him, "Why did you bring me here? Do you know what our copay is?" I was hysterical and I looked down to see my body covered in blood. But I still didn't realize at that moment that it was my own blood. I was crying because of how much I knew this would cost, and extremely confused on what happened. Ends up I was thrown from a vehicle in a wreck. I don't even remember most of that drive, let alone the wreck. Ended up with about 36 stitches to repair the gaping removal of skin from road rash, and a large bill even though we have great insurance. Gotta get those deductibles in. TLDR. Insurance deductibles are scarier than being thrown from a vehicle. My friend rear-ended my new car into another one going 45 miles per hour in Las Vegas. I was in the backseat passed out with no idea he had been drinking. Woke up in a hospital 6 hours later naked, no cell phone, and no idea where I was. I'm alive though, that's the good part. Ended up with alcohol poisoning as a stupid teenager around age 15. I'll spare the minor details. Pretty much high school GF decided I wasn't the one for her. Friends were over and I had an either liter or 750 milliliters bottle of Canadian Club whiskey. She left. I had some friends over staying the night, so I thought it would be a good idea to bust the whiskey out. Now being dumb and young, not knowing my limits, or that something like that could have gotten all four of us S-faced, I ended up chugging the nearly full bottle in like 20 seconds. I recall burping, tasting nothing but whiskey yet had no sign of hawking. We took a walk down the road to the cemetery and smoked a cigar amongst us while listening to Cypress Hill on my friend's loud Skullcandy headphones. That was the last thing I remember. From that point on I apparently became incoherent. Passed out. My friends tried to carry me back to my house but just couldn't. I ended up in front of my neighbor's house and 911 was called by my friends. I know at the time some of the other friends I hung around with at the time would have tried to book it on fear of getting in trouble. These guys stood true. I woke up to beeping, me still being drunk as a skunk wondering why my dong hole hurt. They had to pump my stomach and give me a catheter. Apparently in the state I was in the cops thought I was not just on alcohol. They suspected C. The kicker was my parents asking where I got it. And I told them right from their cabinet. Which I did. And they refused to believe it. So yeah, don't chug a bottle of whiskey at age 15 kids. I was getting a root canal on a tooth inside of my mouth. He finished up and he sat there looking at me. I smiled. I then immediately wake up in a hospital room where a nurse rushes to me and takes some blood from my arm. Not even preparing me or anything. My mom and brother are there looking at me horrified. I was so out of it that I had no idea what even to say. On cue, the doctor walks in and starts explaining my seizure to my mom. A seizure? I was sort of out of it and never got to hear exactly what happened, but I think they hit an artery or something when they gave me Novocaine and it had a weird late reaction. I was getting a root canal on a tooth inside of my mouth. You know, it would be a heck of a backstory if any part of this sentence was false. Playing dodgeball in my first year of high school. Dodged full tilt into the gym wall. Apparently I went to my next class and eventually vomited on my desk and passed out. I only remember dodgeball. I work as an electrician in the entertainment industry. One minute I was focusing a light, then I was in the hospital. I'd fainted and had a seizure. When I'd woken up and come back to some form of communication, apparently I spoke with the EMTs, gave them all the info they needed. Got everything right except for my birthday. I gave them my little brother's instead for some reason. Climbed ladders down out of the roof on my own. Walked into the ambulance. But I don't remember any of that, other than what I've pieced together with help from people on the scene. It was like I was working 1 minute and sitting upright in a hospital bed the next. It had happened the day previously, as well. I didn't go to the hospital that time, but I was way more out of it. When I woke up, I thought it was a year earlier and didn't know who most of the people around me were, only those who I had known the year previously. I smoked a bowl of what I thought was weed with some people I thought were friends. Turned out to be that fake stuff, spice or whatever it's called. Had a bad reaction and had seizures and woke up the next day in a hospital room. Fun times. For your information, that stuff shows up in your blood as methamphetamine. 19 at the time, woke up in a hospital bed super drunk and confused. Dad told me I had to get up and leave right away at 5 in the morning. Long story short, I was at a house party with some friends and the cops busted in at 3 AM while 15 people were dancing on top of the bar in the basement with 2 kegs. I passed out on the couch and the cops handcuffed everyone and made them sit in jail to detox for 24 hours along with a nip. Doctor told my dad and I that it would be in our best interest to leave the hospital before the cops arrived. Received no minor in possession or ambulance ride bill. TLDR. Woke up super drunk and managed to get out of $7,000 worth of fees and charges. H overdose. Woke up without a shirt on with a nurse telling me that I could potentially have brain damage. Was not a comforting thought. It wasn't a surprise. I was semi-conscious when the ambulance arrived and during the ride. But a funny story nonetheless. I was at a hotel party for a friend's b-day, drank a bit too much, and ended up passing out in a chair in the lobby. Apparently, I was dreaming and talking in my sleep, saying crap like help me and warn them, etc. So security calls the ambulance, and, as they're rolling me out, I halfway realize what's going on, and think to myself that I should wake up and stop them. Tried opening an eye and realized it'd be far easier to pass back out. The entire ride to the hospital I was half conscious and, again, saying crap like you have to warn them and it's a crisis. Everyone in danger. The EMS tried to press me for details but I'd always taper off before the big reveal. Later on, After the haze had cleared, I realized what the full warning was that I was trying to say. We're all in danger. There's a crisis coming. You have to warn them. Superman and the Justice League must be warned. I was at work in a big factory making car parts. I was wearing a heavy uniform and being trained to work on a new process. I think this might have been caused by me being very hot combined with dehydrated and missing breakfast. 15 minutes into the training and I started to feel lightheaded and nauseous and not wanting to throw up in the factory. I got my group leader to cover me and I excused myself to the bathroom. I was about 10 steps away from the bathroom door when I was overwhelmed by that blackout sensation. Like the kind you get when you stand up too fast. And I went down, and that was that for me. I woke up in a hospital bed in a town 30 minutes away with stitches in my head as I split my scalp open on the concrete floor. Weirdly, I felt perfectly fine within 5 minutes of waking up. Apparently at work there was a huge commotion because I was not responsive and there was a lot of blood and an ambulance drove through the factory, through the shipping dock and everything. I had to take the rest of the week off, but I felt like I could have just gone to work the next day. It was very strange. I was maybe 9 or 10 at the time. I woke up with a bright light over me with my brother and dad standing next to me. My mom was crying in the corner of the room. I had no idea what was going on. I was in pain and my face was wrapped in bandages. Earlier that day I remember I was with my aunt who was picking up her kids from school. I was sitting her in station wagon in the back seat that was facing the rear window. The story I was told was that during the car ride someone rear-ended us and my face actually hit the window and went through it. I do not remember any of this. I have a few scars on my face but nothing notchable. This was almost 20 years ago now. I was kind of already in the hospital when this happened, but I'd had some bad complications after childbirth. They took me back into the OR to see what was going wrong, figuring it was just a piece of the placenta that hadn't released. I woke up in the ICU with about 5 machines attached to me by various tubes, and found out I'd needed emergency surgery and had died on the table. I was showing my mom the secret base my cousin and I made in the forest when Karma snapped the tree branch supporting me. I suffered heat stroke while at football camp in the 10th grade. The full story is actually a really long one, but I do remember waking up in the hospital with no memory of how I got there. I was still very much outside my mind when I came to in the hospital, and my initial thought upon waking up was that I had been abducted by the government and that the doctors were going to perform experiments on me. You haven't lived until you experience an event where you sincerely and truly believe that you're going to die. I honestly thought that if I didn't escape I'd be killed. My adrenaline went through the roof and I fought my hardest to escape the hospital. I even punched a doctor, but heat stroke sucks all the energy from your body and really fatigues your muscles. I didn't get far on foot before completely collapsing from lack of muscle control. I was so convinced I was going to die that when they got me back into the bed and strapped me down, I laid there and prayed to God. I'm not very religious, but I made peace with my maker and drifted off to sleep. I was pleasantly surprised when I woke up a few hours later. I took some LSD and apparently it wasn't actually acid but some kind of research chemical. I was also on a low dose of antidepressants at the time. The combination of the two caused me to start tripping really hard, like I didn't know where I was or who I was or if I was a human or what humans even were. To make a very long story short, I ran out of my apartment with the door still open. Cats got out. Things were stolen. While I was out of my apartment in this state, I took my shirt off, I'm female, and proceeded to jump on someone's parked car. Police were called. I was taken to the hospital and I woke up there with absolutely no recollection of how I got there. When I asked the nurse if I could go and what had happened, she asked me in a very annoyed voice, "Are you done meowing at us?" And I was released after a while. I will never ever take psychedelics ever again. Also, just so you all know, my cats came back eventually, and yes, I am a cat lady, but holy heck was that a freaking trip. And an expensive one too. I was sitting in my high school English class, reading, and the next thing I knew I woke in an ambulance. I was strapped down and I looked to my left. One of the ambulance guys was sitting with me. He said, "You had a seizure." I just said, "That makes sense," and slid an arm out of the straps to reach for my phone. The phone was in my pocket still. I had so many text messages and no idea what had really happened. The recollection I have was I was reading One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Ironically, a book with lots of seizures in it, and my jaw started twitching. This had been happening occasionally during lengthy reading sessions. Normally I would stop reading, but I was at the end of the book so I pressed on. Then, this next part I thought was a dream, but turned out to be real. My jaw locked open, slowly widening, and every other sound faded into the background. Kind of like when in a war movie someone hears an explosion right next to them and the audio all sounds distant and echo. Why? I made the loudest, most obscure sound I'd ever heard come out of me. Then I woke up in the ambulance. I thought the jaw widening mouth noise was a dream, but I guess that was the start of the seizure. My classmate said I shot up in my desk and made that crazy noise, and that they tried to get me down onto the ground. They succeeded, and also said I had some blood come out of my mouth and some other oddities I don't recall. They then said I was taken to the school nurse and told them my name but the wrong birth date. Apparently I thought I was 22. I was 18 at the time. The most ironic part is the English teacher was completely seizure prepared. He had a seizure blanket and knew exactly what to do, because he'd had a student before that had multiple seizures. However, he was gone that day, so I scared the crap out of the sub. I'd stopped breathing in the middle of the night. Note, I don't actually remember where I came to, since I was only 5 when it happened. This just felt like the dramatic answer. Pedestrian accident. I was walking in a crosswalk with my son, and the next thing I know it was 4 days later and I'm being informed that I had been hit by a truck. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.